Labas rytas, gerbiami kolegos, kviečiu užimti savo vietas, pradedame.
Good morning. We begin the Thursday morning session of the Seimas. His Excellency, President of the Republic of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda. Please be seated.
Kviečiu Respublikos.
I invite President of the Republic of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, to make the State of the Nation address. Fellow people of Lithuania, esteemed Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, this is the third time that I stand before you to review the state of affairs in Lithuania, as well as Lithuania's standing in the world. For the third successive year, I will speak about the challenges we need to overcome to strengthen Lithuania and ensure its security and prosperity. Just as we started to feel more confident about life after COVID-19 at the beginning of this year, we witnessed yet another tragic event. Russia's renewed full-scale war against Ukraine signaled the end of peace and relative tranquility for Lithuania and entire Europe. Since the re-establishment of independence, we have been moving on the path of rapid change. We consolidated Lithuanian statehood and independence. We laid the foundations for a modern economy and a vibrant civil society. For almost 30 years now, we have been guided by the fundamental principles of a democratic constitution adopted by citizens. For 29 years, we have not seen occupying troops in our country. For 18 years, we have been active members of NATO and the European Union. These are outstanding achievements. They testify that we have not been idle since regaining freedom. We have done a great deal in 3 decades to adapt to a neighborhood that has been both aggressive and unstable over the centuries. Therefore, today, we're able to confront danger with courage, to stand up for our principles, and to extend a helping hand to those who need it most. Today, we must do all we can for the well-being of the Lithuanian people and for the prosperity of our state. It means acting in 3 main directions. First, we must do our utmost to support Ukraine and its people in their fight for freedom, dignity, and a better future. This will make us stronger too. Second, we must, with all possible means, restrain the aggression of Russia, which has returned to the path of autocracy, imperial thinking, and territorial expansion. And at the same time, we have to maintain the international rules-based order in the world. Third and foremost, it is our duty to work together to ensure that Lithuania remains strong, resilient, advanced, and self-confident in a changed geopolitical environment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to say that we're handling the first task in an exemplary way. In the first days, weeks, and months of the war, the people of Lithuania demonstrated admirable unity and solidarity. We expressed our togetherness with Ukraine not only by a sea of blue, yellow flags, but also by extending genuine hospitality. We welcomed tens of thousands of Ukrainian refugees with open hearts. We enveloped them with affection and care. We continue donating generously to make sure that vital humanitarian and aid reaches the people of Ukrainians wherever they may be. We were among the first to provide military assistance to Ukraine. We send as much armaments and ammunition as we can afford while keeping Lithuania's defenses intact. We're also among the leaders in private military contributions. Today, the defenders of Ukraine are using ammunition, driving vehicles, destroying enemy aircraft and tanks with missiles, carrying out reconnaissance and adjusting artillery fire with unmanned aerial vehicles received from Lithuania. I assure you that Lithuania will continue to support Ukraine with all possible means. We will support Ukraine because it is a sisterly nation fighting for its freedom and for our freedom. We will support it because we believe in the strong will of the Ukrainian people to build an independent future. We believe that the future of Ukraine belongs with the family of European nations. When peace returns, and it will surely return through the strength and sacrifice of Ukrainian heroes, Lithuania will help Ukrainians to rebuild their country. We are ready and we're preparing to do this today. For me, this is a personal commitment. I saw with my own eyes the destroyed Ukrainian homes with only charred walls left. I deeply and painfully grieve for the irreparably ruined human lives. I know that we will agree on support for Ukraine regardless of our political views or priorities, because the war in Ukraine is our war. It is a war against a scourge that had liberated us from human dignity, statehood, and freedom for 50 long years. We will not allow evil to triumph again. Ladies and gentlemen, the fate of the whole Europe is being decided in Ukraine today. It is therefore essential to curb Russia's imperial ambition by acting together with our friends and allies. Today, there are more of them than ever before. Above all, we must ensure that the EU and NATO countries act with unity, speed, and decisiveness. I see this as my main goal. I have met many times with the leaders of the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and other countries to mobilize support for Ukraine. I placed special focus on building a unified position with our nearest regional neighbors: Poland, Latvia, Estonia, and the Nordic countries. I maintain constructive working contacts with the EU and NATO leaders. Ever since February, Russian aggression in Ukraine has been the main topic of meetings and discussions. I have been consistently working to send a clear and unequivocal message that it is the duty of the whole free world to help Ukraine fight back against Russia. Members of the Seimas, the government, and the Lithuanian diplomatic corps have been doing the same all along. The results are before our eyes. Already in the very first weeks of the war, the EU imposed unprecedented sanctions aimed at significantly limiting Russia's financial and economic capabilities, as well as its potential for technological renewal and progress. These sanctions, coordinated with transatlantic allies, are increasingly straining Russia's energy exports, crucial for the Kremlin's ability to finance the war. But our long-term strategic goal is to free the EU and NATO countries from energy dependence on Russia. Lithuania is a strong leader in this area already now. We can all be proud of that. When several decades ago, we realized that Russia was using energy for blackmail and manipulation, we mobilized our political will and effected the necessary changes. Recent events have confirmed that we were absolutely right. The early launch of the gas interconnection Poland-Lithuania is also an important achievement. It allows Lithuania, Poland, and other countries in the region to receive natural gas supplies using each other's terminals and storage capacities. However, some projects have still been undelivered. First, we must prepare properly and complete as early as possible the synchronization of electricity grids with continental Europe to consolidate our energy independence. Second, we must implement laws we have already adopted and move towards renewable energy. This is a great way to create new jobs and investment in our regions. In addition, it is an antidote to rising energy prices. It is quite clear that the more renewable energy is available in Lithuania and Europe, the less need there will be to look for fossil resources in the East. Once the European countries break free from Russia's energy grip, the groundwork will be laid for the EU's full political self-reliance. Humble telephone calls to Moscow will finally end. It is worth the effort. Lithuania's duty and interests also lie with strengthening the EU's eastern partners. Their individual resilience and ability to implement democratic reform contribute to the security of the entire region, and at the same to the security of Lithuania. The experience of recent years has convincingly shown that countries under Russian economic and political influence are de facto subject to occupation. This has happened in Belarus, where the regime has cynically traded the remnants of national sovereignty for temporary guarantees of survival in power. We cannot allow the scenario to be repeated in other Eastern Partnership countries. That is why I actively promote bilateral relations with these countries, as evidenced by my visits to Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Their fate must be a matter of concern for the European Union as a whole. The focal point of our foreign policy strategy is to maintain a strong transatlantic presence throughout Europe, and especially in the Baltic region. We have always pursued this goal, and we will do so in the future. Therefore, we continue expanding military and technological cooperation with the United States and implementing the 3 Cs initiative. We work with the United Kingdom through the Joint Expeditionary Force. At the time of geopolitical tensions, Lithuania cannot afford the luxury of the golden mean by balancing between the East and the West. Our choice is very clear. On the one side, we can see the freedom, which fosters civic well-being and dignity, and on the other side, we see tyranny, which tramples on human rights and turns the individuals into a meaningless cog or even a tool of crime. Just like 3 decades ago, we choose freedom in the West. But Russia's financial entanglements, propaganda machine, and the network of influence carefully woven around the world for many years remain a formidable force that we cannot underestimate. The skepticism of those who are wary of the ability of some Western countries to open their eyes and see the flawed nature of their long-cherished pragmatic policy towards Russia has its reasons. It is not only the attitude of individual people, but also the entire democratic societies that needs to change. We stand up for the weaker persons who are wronged and against violence in the street, don't we? Why should we behave any differently at the state level? Why should we turn a blind eye on Ukraine being raped? Indifference to the suffering of others sooner or later backfires on those who are indifferent. Lithuania will not be silent when others are in pain. The success of the entire democratic world depends on our determination, patience, and ability to speak with one voice, to speak openly and persuasively. Ladies and gentlemen, as important as it is today to stop Russia's aggression in Ukraine, cannot lose sight of our long-term goals. We must implement measures to ensure our external and domestic stability, increase social resilience, and promote sustainable national growth. The immediate task today is to strengthen our country's military security. The heroic defenders of Ukraine show how much can be achieved by joining forces in the face of a mortal danger. We have accomplished a lot over the last 8 years. We have reinstated mandatory conscription. We have fulfilled our commitment to allocate at least 2% of GDP for defense spending, and we had NATO approve the Baltic defense plans and deploy enhanced forward presence in the region. However, we need to do more and do it faster in the months ahead. I expect ambitious decisions to be made at the upcoming NATO summit in Madrid, which will significantly strengthen the deterrence and defense of the eastern flank of the alliance. The decision of Finland and Sweden to join NATO will also have a positive impact on Lithuania's security. This will be a historic event for the entire Baltic Sea region, as it will leave less room for Russia's policies on intimidation and provocation. NATO has already responded to the Russian threat by expanding its air policing mission in the Baltics. We must substantially reinforce air defense capabilities in Lithuania and other Baltic states. I can't imagine effective deterrence without expanding NATO's enhanced forward presence to brigade size. We have recently agreed on this with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Our readiness to host allied forces will be further improved by the decision to equip and adapt the Rūdininkai training ground for exercises, as well as by investment in our other infrastructure facilities. As the geopolitical situation deteriorates, we need to rapidly prepare for national defense. This year we will spend 2.5% of GDP on defense. In the coming years we will have to invest even more and ensure systematic education and training of military reserve personnel. The more of our men and women are prepared to defend their country, the greater deterrent effect we can expect. To achieve a comprehensive security, we must ensure that state institutions, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and ultimately all citizens are ready to fully support and promote armed defense. The contribution of each and every citizen is significant. Our ability to respond to peacetime critical situations will predetermine our ability to organize civil defense and unarmed resistance. We also have the unsafe Ostrovets nuclear power plant, yet another tool of Russian and Belarusian aggressive policies in our immediate neighborhood. We therefore need to establish the crisis management center as soon as possible, start organizing civil exercises at national level, and move from declarations to actual work on reinforcing fire safety and civil protection. To date, no convincing answers have been provided to questions raised by the public about the adequacy of collective protection structures. It is necessary to ensure that all municipalities have well-equipped shelters that meet at least minimum needs. There can be no doubt that hostile forces will test our vigilance in the most unexpected ways. The illegal migration crisis at our borders also has proved this. Both the Belarusian regime and Russia, which controls it, have demonstrated that they are determined to destabilize not only Lithuania, but also EU and NATO neighbors without any scruples. By orchestrating mass migration from third countries, they turned migrants into cannon fodder for political blackmail and revenge. By putting innocent people into danger, authoritarian regimes once again displayed their contempt for inherent human rights. On the other hand, in the face of this hybrid attack, we saw that we can count on the support of our friends and allies. We should also commend Lithuanian institutions, which adjusted quite successfully to changes at the border and contained the hybrid attack. Most importantly, the migration crisis proved an impetus to launch long-delayed work on strengthening the protection of Lithuania's national and the EU's external borders. Ladies and gentlemen, another crisis that had been testing our patience for a long time subsided before the summer. After a couple of long and difficult years with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're back to normal life. Today, more than 80% of vaccinated adults in Lithuania have at least partial vaccine protection. More than 1 million have recovered from the disease. Daily COVID-19 cases and deaths have decreased by dozens of times compared to the beginning of the year. This allows us to breathe more easily. No more compulsory wearing of face masks, no more harsh restrictions on life. But even as the pandemic turns into an endemic, we cannot relax too much. The virus is still around. We must be prepared to effectively contain new outbreaks and a possible new wave of COVID-19 next autumn. It is especially important to focus on the elderly. Although vaccines are currently available for all, it is necessary to stock up on tests, COVID-19 medications, protective equipment, and hospital beds. The coronavirus cannot be allowed to disrupt the work of medical and educational establishments again and again, and it cannot disrupt public life again. I hope we did not forget the lessons of the pandemic. Now is the time to take critical stock of what has worked and what should be done differently. We must admit that in our efforts to combat the COVID pandemic effectively, we have not always found common ground on how to achieve this. Reluctance to listen to what the experts say caused problems too. Even when we agreed that containing the pandemic should be guided by expert opinion, we were impeded by political calculations, the desire to take the easiest path, and failure to acknowledge and rectify mistakes. Vocal demands to refrain from interfering with work were unfortunately used as a cover for inaction, for drifting without a roadmap, for delays in acting on expert recommendations on foreign best practices. Public awareness and vaccination messages were insufficient. We saw widespread labeling and disrespect for human beings. It was decided that a whip works much better than a carrot, and that people could be vaccinated like a herd. The result was the opposite to the expected one. Inoculation rates fell behind the EU average in Lithuania. Vaccination and revaccination coverage of vulnerable groups remained low, and disproportionate and scientifically unsubstantiated testing restrictions came at a high cost to us all. The COVID-19 crisis soon turned into a crisis of political confidence. Even now that the pandemic threat has receded, the situation in healthcare remains challenging. While there have been positive developments, such as restructuring ambulance services, introducing fixed tenures for heads of medical institutions, and launching projects to transform the healthcare network, people do not yet feel that things have improved. Quite the opposite. Access to healthcare requires urgent solutions. It is absolutely abnormal that year on year we have a situation of having to wait for 4 months to see a child development specialist. And the waiting list to see a child psychiatrist, cardiologist, or vascular surgeon is no shorter. The story of an elderly woman I heard on the radio a few weeks ago has stuck in my mind. She had to wait for 8 months to be diagnosed and prescribed treatment. Too many of our people get sick and die prematurely because they fail to receive quality care in time. As we plan a health reform, we continue to spin in a vortex of goals and targets. We know what needs to be done. The big question is how and when. That's why we need to move from words to action once and for all. Healthcare reform must bring about a very clear qualitative change for our people. So far, we have not seen a step forward in the reform of the nursing care system launched by the previous government. This reform is needed to reduce the burden on loved ones caring for the seriously ill or disabled. Let us finally understand that high-quality health, education, cultural and social services, equally accessible to all, are the key to reducing regional disparities and tackling demographic challenges. The well-being of many people depends on it. Unfortunately, in Lithuania, structural reforms are still associated with the absorption of money by a group of friends rather than associated with qualitative change. Only new, unvarnished success stories will help to get rid of this negative perception. Ladies and gentlemen, recently, another crisis has been waging on all of us and demanding our solidarity. That's inflation. At the beginning of the year, we started to pay considerably more for heating, gas, electricity, fuel, food, and services. For the first time over a long period of time, wages and social benefits are rising much more slowly than prices. Monetary depreciation is absorbing the benefits of pension increases. Those with the lowest income are the hardest hit by growing commodity prices. The elderly, people with disabilities, poor families. The exposure to inflation is even greater and more painful. All of this has been caused by factors beyond our control, but the effects of inflation can and must be mitigated. Therefore, more than 4 months ago, I submitted a proposal to the Seimas not only to increase tax-free income at a faster rate, but also to support the elderly, people with disabilities, and families with targeted single payments during this critical period. I've heard a lot of skeptical voices. There are those who say that the state does not have the money, that increased incomes will fuel inflation even more, and that there is no need to rush, as if we were not among the last in Europe to respond to record-high inflation. Political will eventually emerged, although a lot of time has been wasted. We reached a consensus on the need to increase personal income. For the second time in a year, tax-free income was raised for working people and extra assistance provided for the elderly and people with disabilities. Social support has also been increased, access to heating allowances has been expanded, and electricity and gas compensations have been granted for 6 months. But the rise in the cost of energy, food, and other goods and services is continuing and even accelerating. This may require mitigating inflation once again before the end of this year. It is important to ensure that such intervention with taxpayers' money is reserved only to the most vulnerable households, not for all electricity and gas consumers, especially those who can earn millions. Let us be realistic. The growth in personal income and its current rate will not deepen social exclusion and poverty, but neither will it reduce them. This makes targeted social policies increasingly more important. They must cover the most vulnerable groups in society. This is the only way to achieve a greater sense of justice. People need to feel they can trust public authorities, People need to feel they are not left alone to fight injustice, that Lithuania is gradually moving away from wild capitalism towards a Western welfare model. Some developments in social security are encouraging, indeed. A pension adjustment model, which I have been pushing for since 2019, has been finally introduced, allowing for an additional annual increase in retirement payments until they reach at least 50% of their average wage. Single-person allowances have also been introduced. Efforts to integrate people with disability into the labor market, as well as the introduction of a personal assistant, are encouraging. A call for ways to make such services more accessible and to better adapt information and the environment to the needs of the disabled. The quality of life of the disabled can no longer be a matter for just one or two ministries at most. I'd like to see a much greater effort by ministries, all ministers and executive officials in the public sector. We also need more ambitious ideas and more welfare-enhancing solutions to strengthen families. I urge to create not props, but real, accessible, and high-quality services aimed at developing children's pursuits, national education, healthcare, cultural interests, social assistance, adequate conditions for work, active leisure, and access to housing. In order to strengthen and expand the middle class as a backbone of our economy, we need to create more quality jobs in the region and to mobilize efforts on improving the quality of education and advancing innovation. Finally, it is our duty to distribute the added value generated by the economy more evenly and fairly. The inequality embedded in the Lithuanian tax system remains a serious problem. It seems that everybody understands the problem and tends to nod in agreement, but loud promises of an ambitious tax reform have unfortunately come to nothing for the umpteenth time. The government is running out of time to implement one of the most important items of its program. The business community is left in the dark, while people are gradually losing hope that there will be ever more order, transparency, and simplicity in taxation, and that there will be fewer undeserved privileges and loopholes for tax abuse. The planned tax reform was supposed to boost investment that we need most every day today. Unfortunately, food dragging is beginning to put Lithuania's sustainable economic growth at risk. At the same time, the country continues to live on a stringent diet. Our liabilities are mounting, but they are not covered by additional government revenue received or earned. Much hope is placed on promises to strengthen and streamline the civil service. However, the public sector continues to bleed, with the best and the brightest minds leaving it. Ladies and gentlemen, when I speak about the challenging situation in the public sector, I can't remain silent about the difficulties faced by the judiciary. It is not going through the best of times right now. The salaries of judges are being less competitive, and the profession itself is losing appeal. This is dangerous because the judiciary is constitutionally responsible for administering justice. Ever since the beginning of my term in office, I've worked closely with the judicial central government, which has assigned a far from symbolic role in the strengthening of the system's efficiency, preventing unethical behavior by judges, and distributing the workload evenly. In pursuit of change, I've put forward specific proposals, which, for the reasons difficult to understand, are making their way through the Seimas extremely slowly. The same applies to procedures for approval of some judges, which have already turned into behind-the-door battles. If we want to increase public confidence, we must strengthen not only the courts of law, but also pre-trial investigation institutions and the prosecutor's office. Positive change has already been introduced in the public procurement. I initiated its reform to make public procurement more professional and efficient. I proposed to entrust procurement to professional central contracting agencies, to depoliticize procurement commissions, and to involve certified specialists in the work of these commissions, as well as to address strategic procurement issues at the state level. Unfortunately, the Seimas did not summon the political will to adopt the proposals in full. Although the government, unlike local municipalities, has the power to decide on the extent of centralized procurement, this right must be exercised responsibly, otherwise we will continue drifting from one procurement scandal to another. Another important step is the initiative launched to revise the law on prevention of corruption, aimed at promoting transparency and applying best practices, drafted in line with the recommendations of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It should bring into motion the system, which has remained unchanged for almost several decades. Changes in the funding of road network are welcome. This is a good development because it allows municipalities to better plan the use of funds and plan road and reconstruction in a more sustainable manner. There is now certainly less room for corruption and political games in decision-making. The time has come to look at the development of Lithuania's transport through the eyes of the 21st century. Unfortunately, this is where we continue to pay heavily for our lack of strategic thinking and long-standing indifference to public services. The decline of public transport in the regions and failure to introduce quality suburban transport services had led to an erratic growth in the number of private vehicles and consequently to traffic congestion and air pollution. We give hundreds of millions of euros every day to oil dealers and refiners. When will we finally admit that this is a dead end? A closer look at RAND will reveal that restructured health and school networks need more efficient public transport in the regions and new platforms for transport services. I have no illusions. We have a long and winding road ahead towards a modern transport model. We will have to overcome both the inertia of habits and bureaucratic obstacles, but I believe that we will eventually make it. Ladies and gentlemen, by being closer to the people, local self-governments are best placed to identify the real needs of societies. No wonder that they have played a key role in dealing with the pandemic and illegal migration. It is therefore truly disappointing that relations between central government and local municipalities are still clouded by miscommunication and undelivered promises. It was at the very last moment that a blunder, which could have deprived Lithuanian voters of the right to directly elect municipal mayors, was corrected. Despite loud statements and an agreement signed by parliamentary parties, the matter of municipal financial autonomy remains unresolved. In other words, the promise is ongoing. Therefore, I have submitted to the Seimas amendments to the constitutional law on the implementation of the fiscal compact, aimed at expanding the ability of local municipalities to borrow for investment in projects aimed at mitigating climate change and digitalizing the public sector and the economy. I believe that the Lithuanian self-government can play a significant role in improving environmental protection and fighting climate change. Sometimes it's enough to simply stay out of the way. Recently, Vilnius and Tauragė town have signaled a welcome ambition to join the 100 EU cities aspiring to become climate neutral by 2030. While working together with my team in the regions, I see that other Lithuanian districts and municipalities are seeking ways to introduce new green solutions and innovation. By 2050, the whole of Lithuania has to be climate neutral. To prepare for this, we must significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Our objectives are even bolder than those of the European Union, but unless we develop an algorithm for solutions, they will remain empty words. Regrettably, despite the efforts of the Ministry of Environment and other ministries, the governing majority has not yet agreed on the decisions that are needed to deliver the national climate change management agenda. It is not clear how greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced in the transport sector. The war in Ukraine has made it obvious that agriculture is a strategically important national security sector, which will help us achieve environmental goals. Qualitative changes and clear agricultural policy priorities that we agreed on when appointing the minister have become even more relevant. Regrettably, we're still waiting to see the actual results of his work regarding the short food supply chains or fairer distribution mechanism for the direct payments. In the meantime, the stalled dialogue with farmers has become a source of constant bickering.
Prisijungę prie pasaulinės miškų išsaugojimo Glasgow deklaracijos, įsipareigojame iki 2030 metų.
By signing up to the Glasgow Declaration of Forest Conservation, we have made a commitment to stop deforestation by 2030. Although solutions have been finally found this year to protect the Punios Šilas forest, stalling negotiations on the National Forest Agreement remains a cause for concern. If we truly want to leave a green, sustainable Lithuania for future generations, we must mobilize our political will to overcome red tape and, in some cases, business resistance. Let's be open. We need to act today, because tomorrow will be simply too late. Ladies and gentlemen, for more than a year now, we have been dealing with the challenge of helping the Lithuanian economy to unleash its potential and competitiveness. Gone are the days when we needed any kind of investment. Cheap labor is no longer, and we will never be Lithuania's advantage in business. After almost 2 decades since joining the EU, our people deserve decent remuneration for their skills and work. Business that bases its competitiveness on low wages will therefore have to search for other places to invest. What we are waiting for are investments that will guarantee qualitative progress in our economy. I can't see rapid economic growth without smart economic diplomacy and state-level efforts to open new markets for our business. This year, however, some Lithuanian businesses have suffered from China's stormy reaction to the opening of a Taiwanese representative office in Vilnius. This decision was made, the decision to open the representative office was made on the assumption that China's response would be limited to restricting export and import operations and would not affect third-country business in Lithuania. It turned out to be very optimistic. Still, worse, no countermeasures were prepared. Businesses were not notified in time. May I remind you that until recently, Lithuanian businesses were encouraged to develop cooperation contacts with Chinese companies, but those who had suffered losses were told to be patient and, in between the lines, to keep quiet. The state must help businesses to open the door to alternative markets, to diversify exports and investment. It's irresponsible to adapt to the principle of wood is cut, the chips fly. The strategic goal of Lithuania's economic policy is to focus on creating high added value, to avoid the middle-income trap. Only a knowledge-based economy can successfully employ the newest scientific advances to meet this challenge. The success stories in biotechnology, information technologies, lasers, and other sectors are encouraging. Traditional economic sectors are not less competitive. The 2.2 billion euro funding from the EU's Economic Recovery Fund has been extensively negotiated at the European level and opens new horizons for Lithuania. As long as Lithuania remains the recipient of financial assistance, it's our responsibility to the future generations to use it in a timely and efficient manner. Lithuania's progress is unthinkable without extensive digitalization, providing full access to data and ensuring the right to information. We also expect soon a positive boost from the newly established National Development Authority. It started with the idea of a National Development Bank, which was initially met with skepticism by many. However, the idea was finally taken root, overcoming resistance, and I hope it will be properly implemented to expand our potential to fill the gaps in investment financing. I also welcome the establishment of a joint innovation agency. On the other hand, I need to point out that science and business in Lithuania are still moving along at different paths. Without a system for putting scientific achievements into practice, discoveries made by our scientists will never make it past the office or laboratory lab doorstep. I would like to remind parliamentary parties of their promise to increase funding for scientific and experimental research. Without additional financing resources, it will be difficult to strengthen collaboration between science and business, promote transnationalism, and expand research competences. I am convinced that education will remain the strongest long-term pillar of Lithuania's progress, renewal, and prosperity. I take the opportunity to thank the teachers, heads of educational establishments, and the entire school community for their earnest efforts to ensure the education of Lithuanian children during the pandemic and to create the necessary educational environment for those Ukrainian children who have been forced into immigration. You have done your professional and civil duty without hesitation, and you deserve our utmost respect. Concerning the state of national education, I have to point out that there are still many challenges to overcome. The restructuring of educational institutions makes sense only to the extent that it creates preconditions for improving the quality of school education, especially in remote regions. We have a duty to ensure that all Lithuanian children are provided with equal opportunities to discover and develop their diverse talents. We need to support young people who pursue academic and career heights. I have high hopes for the inter-party agreement on education policy. Decisions on education policies and results must be based on the provisions and benchmarks outlined in that agreement. The Equal Start package, which I propose to provide access to preschool education for children from families at social risk, has already been launched. Progress has also been made in inclusive education. However, adjustment of infrastructure is stalling, and there is still a shortage of educational support specialists and inclusive teachers. Vocational training system deserves more attention, and it has to be modernized and adapted to modern needs. We also need to consolidate the principle of lifelong learning, which is essential for success in a competitive and fast-changing world. To improve access to higher education, I've put forward a proposal to ease the barriers to higher education for young people with work experience or qualification. Deliberations on this project are an excellent example of goodwill and cooperation between public authorities. I hope that its provisions will be adopted in this parliamentary session. On the other hand, I will be open. The current state of sports policy is disappointing. After dismantling the sports governance system that had existed in Lithuania for many years, we have come with nothing more effective. Sports federations are now pulling a thin blanket of financial support, failing to deliver on the role assigned to them by the reformed Department of Physical Education. We no longer have a credible system for training high-performance athletes, and in many cases, athletes are left to their own devices. How much more frustration do we have to experience at the Olympic Games, World and European Championships before we wake up to admit that we can no longer continue floating like this? Physical training and education from an early age hasn't received the due attention it deserves. Physical literacy continues to rest largely on the shoulders of enthusiasts. Despite the development of cultural education in recent years to encourage the convergence of culture and education, we can still not speak about full cultural empowerment. We lack measures to ensure equal access to culture across Lithuania, regardless of the social, economic, or residential status of individuals. The cultural dimension is not given sufficient attention in regional policies either. We're still unable to introduce children to culture in an attractive and encouraging way, which is why they open door to the amazing world of arts and music much later, and only after they reach their adult years. The podiums often resound with talk about patriotic education and historical awareness. But is it not a shame that during 32 years of re-established independence, we have failed to reprint the Aušra newspaper that had laid the foundations for February 16th? We have settled for random excerpts which do not give us even a rough idea of the contents of the Aušra newspaper, of its contributors, let alone the rich language of the writings of that magazine. As long as we lack an understanding of our roots, and as long as we see individual historical figures through the prism of Soviet historiography, it is not surprising that a monument to the first president of the independent Lithuania, Antanas Smetona, still is not erected in Vilnius. I see global promotion of Lithuanian culture in much brighter colors. We can be proud about the success of our artists in international competitions and biennales. Many documentaries and feature films have been received very well internationally, and Lithuanian theatre is well known abroad. Most importantly, state-provided support should reach those artists who deserve it, not those who are best skilled in the bureaucratic intricacies of the distribution of funds. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Seimas, over the past years, we've demonstrated that we can unite in the face of external threats. This was true when we faced a migration attack orchestrated by the Belarusian regime, and it is also true now, when all political forces are standing shoulder to shoulder for Ukraine. Unfortunately, we lack the ability to learn and listen to each other when it comes to decisions that are essential for the well-being of the Lithuanian people. Discussions that have not even started are sealed with a dry no. Proposals coming from the wrong side of the parliamentary chamber sink into the drawers or wither, awaiting conclusions by the side of the parliament chambers by the government. Votes are cast not against the proposal, but to show the opponents their place. And even we even sit in different chambers of the Seimas. It is very important to me that everyone here today, both the position and the opposition, both the majority and the opposition, are brought to a dialogue. It is my duty as head of state to promote dialogue, but this requires goodwill on all sides and a willingness to instill new political culture, not by electoral promises, but by personal example. This is something I still lack. I'm certain that the people of Lithuania need it too, because every good initiative derailed by political ambition and every decision delayed ultimately affects their well-being, the well-being of the Lithuanian people. Dear fellow people of Lithuania, the war in Ukraine has demonstrated not only the heroism of the Ukrainian people, but also the empathy and intolerance to justice inherent in our nation. We know firsthand that sometimes we have to pay in blood for freedom and dignity, and we support the Ukrainians without any reservations or preconditions. The war in Ukraine has also revealed the force that can be unleashed by civic commitment, inspiring to act even before political decisions are made. We can be proud of the inexhaustible energy of our people. We need to tap into it, to respond to the challenges facing Lithuania. Confident in the civic spirit of our nation, I have launched the Lithuania Power Initiative. It's open to all Lithuanian people, irrespective of their age, background, education, hobbies, or political beliefs. It was launched for peace, not for war, for the desire to do more than stated in instructions, for the sake of serving your community, street, city, and county, or the entire country, for Lithuania with more kindness, more optimism, and more supporting spirit. Therefore, I have invited, and today invite all active people, social movements, communities, and non-governmental organizations to engage more dynamically in public life, and at the same time, in creating welfare in Lithuania. The Lithuania Power Initiative can and must involve Lithuanians living abroad. We have had many opportunities today to witness that patriotically minded people are able to create a Lithuania of their dreams, even when they are far away from their home country. The most important thing is today is that in their heart, they never stay away from homeland. Therefore, today I call on you from this rostrum to support the idea of a referendum on preserving Lithuanian citizenship so that as many as possible in the diaspora could maintain a living bond with Lithuania. I have no doubt that together we can build a strong, fair, greener, innovative, and self-confident Lithuania. Everything is in our hands. Thank you. We thank the President of the Republic of Lithuania, Gitano Nausėdos, and all distinguished guests. His Excellency, President of the Republic of Lithuania.
Skelbiu 5 minučių posėdžio pertrauką, tuomet grįšime registruotis darbotvarkei.
I declare the intermission for 5 minutes.